Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Dillon. I am the chair of the Economic Club of Chicago, and I'm really thrilled to be here today on this snowy afternoon here in Chicago, and really pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Roz Brewer. When Roz was studying chemistry at Spelman College in Atlanta, her initial plan was to become a doctor until a position as a research tech at Kimberly-Clark caught her eye. Thank God she likes science and medicine, is all I can say, because here she is today. She's become the CEO of Walgreens Boots Alliance, and that happened in March of 2021, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was raging, and the company was taking on a key role as a vaccine provider, not to mention also providing supplies like paper towels and hand sanitizers. You know, really a true definition of an essential retailer, and Roz was up for the challenge. Now, as most of you know, Roz has had an incredible career. Her two most recent roles, president and CEO of Sam's Club, a division of Walmart, from 2012 to 2017, and most recently, she was a chief operating officer at Starbucks from 2017 to 2021. And there, I was fortunate to get to know Roz, both as a board member, as a key executive, spending time together from the boardroom to tasting rooms to a bus tour of stores in China. Next came the top job at Walgreens Boots Alliance, a Fortune 19 company with a current market cap of over $40 billion and over 300,000 employees across the globe. Notably, Roz is one of only two Black women to lead a Fortune 500 company. And for those of us here in Chicago, we couldn't be more proud, Roz, that you're running a great Chicago institution. So just a little bit of history, because I love the history of companies. I think most people here know this, but Walgreens is a homegrown company. It began in 1901, a small food front store on the corner of Bowen and Cottage Grove Avenues in Chicago on the south side, owned by Charles R. Walgreens, a native of Dixon, Illinois. And then Walgreens went on to expand, of course, and the rest is history. So, Roz, the first job I had with my name on a paycheck, I was actually working for a competitor, Osco Drug. But I love this industry. So we're happy that you have this job, is all I can say. Now, under Roz's leadership, Walgreens Boots Alliance is on the move, as I like to say, exceeding the first quarter expectations with $34 billion in sales and announcing really exciting strategic moves. And she's also launched their new purpose, More Joyful Lives Through Better Health. Roz is also the chairperson of the board of trustees at Spelman College and is currently ranked number 6 on Fortune's most powerful women in business. She was also recently named one of the top 25 most influential women by the Financial Times. So here today to talk about her leadership journey, what health and retail might look like in a post-pandemic world, and her plans for Walgreens Boots Alliance, fellow Economic Club member Roz Brewer. So thank you, Roz, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're thrilled. I'd like to start, if you don't mind. We won't go on a deep dive of your whole background, but I think it's really cool to just start. Let's just talk broadly. What are some of the key factors and influences that have made Roz Brewer the woman that she is today?
Well, Mary, you're sitting in Chicago today, not too far from my hometown of Detroit, Michigan. And as many of us know, growing up in the Midwest, you start work before you go to work, right? So trekking through 12 inches of snow, in elementary school and walking 13 blocks to school in junior high, you get to have this certain kind of work ethic. So I reflect back on that quite a bit. Youngest of 5 children. My parents worked in the big 3 auto industry in Michigan. And so, we just, all we knew was hard work ethic that usually happens in the Midwest. And so I think about those influences. Then I also think about my influence of attending Spelman College, an all-women's college, historically Black college, and in the South. And I think that really shaped me coming from the Midwest and being in an environment like Spelman.
Hey, maybe you can share a little bit about how you ended up at Spelman. I don't think that was always like a dream you had or a plan that you had. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
No, I didn't know much about Spelman, to be honest with you, or the HBCU concept or thinking or single sex institutions. That wasn't my intent. I wasn't very deliberate about that. I'm the youngest of 5 children. My older siblings were in college at the time. There were 4 of us in college of the 5 of us. And, my parents didn't go to college. So the process of just applying for college came from my older siblings. And being the youngest, they pushed me out of the state and said, you're gonna get away. You're gonna go out of state. I had planned to go to a small engineering school, science school called Lawrence Tech, which was actually aligned with the automotive industry. And I thought, I'd study there and maybe either do engineering, or I thought of, medical school and becoming an optometrist. No blood, no gore, and so that was my thinking. But I had a fantastic high school guidance counselor, Dr. Geneva Carter, who was a Spelman graduate. And she would show me pictures and booklets, pamphlets of Spelman. Remember, no internet at that time, aging myself.
Mhm.
And I thought it was a fantastic place. Dr. Carter was everything to me. I wanted to be Dr. Carter. And she just lived in this space where she was so confident and sure of herself, outspoken, and really knew our history well in terms of the African American history. She was just a pillar for me of strength. And so when she said you should consider, I thought about it, and my sister helped me apply, and the rest was history after that.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, talk about the powerful role of role models, people in your high school life, counselors. What did your siblings see in you that they knew that they needed to push you or wanted to see what you could achieve by pushing, out of your comfort zone? I'm really curious about that.
Sure. So, being the youngest, I either got pushed around a lot or loved on a lot, right? And so I was the baby sister. So I have a brother next to me. We're super close. And so I became a little tough. I was probably rough around the edges, probably the most aggressive out of the five. I think they were pushing me out because I was driving them nuts. But no, I also think that they knew, I had done a lot of leadership work in high school, working in the community. I actually had a summer internship at a pharmaceutical company before I came to college, something that I
Mm.
found on my own. And so I think they knew that I was probably a little more aggressive about what I wanted to do with myself, although it was loosely defined. So they wanted something different. And at the time, Michigan was going up and down in its economy, and
Yeah.
they, wanted to do something different, and then maybe saw something different in me. So they really encouraged me.
Well, that's really cool. They must be very proud. And I think for everybody in the audience, there's so many people with so much influence and potential to help make a difference in people's lives. And I'm sure, like you, I mean, we spend a lot of time, anytime a young person comes to me for career advice or, how do you balance career and family or whatever it is, I always make an effort to just do, whatever wisdom I can give because you never know where that's really going to help, help somebody in their trajectory. So that Dr. Carter, we like her.
Absolutely.
So let's talk
Yes.
about your career journey. If you don't mind, we'll pivot to that. So Kimberly Clark, Sam's Club, Starbucks, Walgreens, a wonderful array of truly blue chip companies. Talk to me about what's the through line. How do you see the through line in the steps that you've made in your career?
Mary, a few things that I've really thought about, especially as I was taking on this role at WBA, was the common thread of very strong culture, mission, and values. And most times in my career, I've been associated with the founder still being aligned with the company. So, as you well know, Howard Schultz at
Mhm.
Starbucks and the Walton family at Walmart. And when I joined Kimberly Clark, Dick Kimberly and some of the other family members were still aligned. So there was something about the founder's mentality that I aligned to. I think it helps to retain the culture of the company in its most basic form and most truest form. And so that I think is one common thread. I think the second thread is that I have been fortunate to be with, pretty significant blue chip companies, but also what is a common thread is the kind of growth mindset that these companies have had. Many of them have been growth, organic growth, right? And so either fast paced transformation needed because, you look at a company like Walmart, 2.2 million employees around the world, but really a relatively young company. I remember taking on Sam's Club, And it was a company that, started in Midwest Oklahoma in 1962, actually. So a pretty young company. So now let's say there's some startups now, but 50-year-old company, but needing to transform itself. And so, those are the exciting things that I look back on, is the thread of the founder's mentality, strong mission and values, growth mindset, and organic growth, which I've always enjoyed.
That's super interesting, and not afraid to take on challenges. I like that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. We'll come back to that, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But well, actually, that's probably a good segue to the next question I had, which is, I know that when one, throughout our career, we move into different roles or different companies or whatever, and there's always some challenge. I mean, certainly those things that are the toughest make us the strongest and prepare us the best. So maybe talk about any leadership challenge or challenges that you think really help prepare you for the role that you have today as CEO of Walgreens.
You know, the, when I think about the leadership challenges that have helped me as I've gotten into these accelerated roles or expanded roles, I will tell you I've had some of the toughest jobs in my career. There were times, Mary, where I think I was counted out more so than counted in. And so I was given the assignment that probably no one else wanted to have, or was the small assignment. I remember my first P&L was $100 million, and I thought, man, I've just hit the jackpot, until I sat with other people at my level and the M was a B. And I was like, man, I've got the baby business. And as baby businesses are, you're always up for, budget cuts and things. And I remember this was at Kimberly Clark, and I was leaving research, going into my first business role, and looking at the size of that P&L, I was, at first intimidated, and then after a while, I was like, this is a learning environment for me. But I better do well, regardless of the size. I never took it for granted, the small positions and small jobs that were given to me. I took 3 demotions in my career just to learn. I actually, took not only demotions, but, a lot of positions that were lateral positions, just to go from one discipline to another. Remember, I started off as a research scientist, and within 5 years, I was on the business side of the company. And so without an MBA. So I had to, what I call, sort of zigzag back and forth, between the decisions I was making about my career path. But those small assignments turned out to be my best learning environment for me. I got a chance to learn sort of under the radar.
That is super interesting. You brought back a memory. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Being part of a company when I was at Quaker and part of a portfolio, like I'm running maybe Quaker Chewy granola bars, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, Gatorade gets all the funding, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? So that how you navigate within a company, the various ways of a portfolio of businesses. Um, you know, Actually, one of the things I want to ask you about here, it is actually pretty remarkable because I know that in corporate America, people tend to get put into their boxes or their functional boxes, and to go from a research scientist to be leading a P&L, and that was not an easy, probably a likely path for you. So again, did you push for that, or did somebody see in you, or was it a combination of both those things that you were able to move? Because I bet you not very many people made that move.
Yeah, I actually know that it was a combination of both. Bench chemistry can get pretty lonely at times. You're in the lab, and weekends in a lab, setting up, operations in a lab is not fun. You're always on the end of, is the research going to get cut or not? But also, too, just working with, lead PhD scientists, and trying to construct, new ideas and innovation. I think I had the analytics, I had the understanding of the work, but I also became a student of the business. And I always would question why, right? So, sure, we can create, my first job was in polymer science. We can create unique polymers for the infant care business, but at the same time, what is that leading to? And so I would always ask those questions, and to the point where I probably aggravated my leadership. But I think then they saw that I had a great curiosity for the growth of the business, and not only just the assignment I was working on. Although I always wanted to know where my work was leading me. And so I think what started for me was I worked on the M&A team at Kimberly-Clark when they were transforming themselves from a paper company to consumer products. And that was exciting for me. And I actually worked on the team looking at all the patent estates and those kinds of things, but sitting with a ton of lawyers and a ton of financial people. And I learned a lot. And I think that's where my real self came out. And I had one leader that I worked for. Jose Pasos was my first boss at Kimberly-Clark, and he saw this in me and, continued to push me to find my real passion. And ultimately I did.
That's really cool. And I mean, again, there's some great leadership lessons. Many people on this call are very senior in their career, but as they're growing your career, you describe some things I think are good for people to know, that showing curiosity, showing that you can think out of your zone and think big picture for the enterprise is a great recipe
Yes,
for being seen and heard. You know what I mean? It's a good way to show what you're capable of, and that can really help in people's careers, I think. So actually,
I
let me
think
just
so too.
then stay on this, because you said student of the business. I saw you in action on that at Starbucks. Incredible how deep and quick you learn things. And I've heard you talk about a learning culture, and that's important to you. So if you think about, and kind of as you're in different organizations or parts of your career, have you taught people about the benefits of a learning culture, or are there any roadblocks in creating a learning culture? I'd just love to unpack that a little more.
Yeah, sure. So, I've always looked at my leadership style. I feel my greatest responsibility is to teach and train. I find, teachable moments in everything that I do. At least I seek to do that. And, I think that sometimes that's forgotten, because in these big roles that some of us have, you want to focus on your P&L and all those other things you need to do. But, to create an environment where people feel comfortable learning, it actually aligns to the growth mindset, right? Because they're, first of all, be willing to take risk. Part of that is learning new opportunities, envisioning, innovating. But there's, so many companies or times even in my career where, you would push off things like the research and development area or the innovation team to innovate. And, along the way, I learned how important it is that everybody in the company has to be the innovator, right? You've got to innovate everything you're doing and keep it churning and turning. And so, as my leadership responsibilities grew, I realized how many times when I was sitting in some of those seats, deep down in the company, and I wasn't getting developed and I didn't understand what was going on. And so I look at that and say, if everybody's on the boat learning, or teaching and training, it's a progressive part of the environment and the company that I think we need to push for. So examples like at Starbucks, we did create the innovation lab within our
Mhm.
building, and everyone in the building would come down and work in sessions. And what we brought in was the design thinking. We brought in the group from Stanford and went through that whole process for the entire company. And it began to change how everyone thought about not just the beverage team creates.
Mhm.
And actually, it's also a great way, Mary, to create inclusion because, you're all in it at the same time and you're mixing agile teams together in different disciplines. And before you know it, you've got a lot of different people in the room thinking about the biggest problems to solve for the company.
Wow, that's great. That's a really helpful kind of putting some more meat on the bone of what you mean by a learning culture. And again, the Starbucks lab is a great example of that I saw in real time. It's
Hmm.
still very actively
Hmm.
used. So, well,
Right.
let's now talk about Walgreens. All right. So I'm so
Yes.
excited again that you're here in Chicago running this great company. And let's start first. Why did you make the move to Walgreens? Let's start there.
So, as you know, I was having a great time at Starbucks. It's a wonderful company. I'd learned a lot. And at that time, we were probably about 1 year into the pandemic. If we think about, it really started in February of 20. And around, a year after that, we are still seeing people not believing in the ability of vaccinations, and I began to see communities of people dying from the result of the pandemic. And it's hard to sit there and watch that when you've got a background in retail and execution and operations, And, part of my career also too has not been only helping large companies grow, but to also influence the community. So I felt really compelled to take a look at this opportunity when it was presented to me, because it gave me an opportunity to jump in and think about things like vaccine equity, and how do we bring the education forward on those who are most immune compromised, people who of black and brown skin who were at the time dying at disproportionate rates, and it's hard to sit on the sidelines and watch that happen. So I will tell you that I evaluated the opportunity more through my heart than I did my head. And so, yes, I did read a ton, about the financial performance of the company and those kinds of things. But I was really, really drawn to the opportunity, one, to get in the middle of what was happening in our world. And then, secondly, I did look at the company and looked at, its performance and said, this company is in need of transformation. And it's right in the middle of, the stickiness of the pandemic. So I was hugely attracted to that opportunity. And then, everything else sort of fell in line. I was becoming an empty nester. My youngest was going to college, and it was time to, you know, do what really satisfied my passions. And so I jumped in with
Mhm.
both feet.
Well, and like I said in the intro, it is kind of interesting to go back to the beginning of your career, which was in science, right? So that's just so interesting. And listen,
Absolutely.
Roz, it's wonderful to see somebody be able to, you're at a stage of your life and career where it's great to be able to choose something that's not only a great career move, but something that you really care about, that really matters. And we don't always get those
Absolutely.
opportunities in our lives, right?
That's exactly right, Mary.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's keep digging in on Walgreens. So much to talk about. So
Sure.
first 100 days, so you get there. So what did you see? Was it what you thought? How did you start to frame up the agenda at the beginning in the middle of a global pandemic? Yes.
Right. So, walking in the door March 15th, which is, I'm approaching, I'm right at 11 months right now. It was interesting. The entire company was forward facing on vaccine administration and the work that was happening in our stores. But there was also some interesting work that had started about 2 years prior in healthcare innovation. The company had already began to think about what's next and looking at new growth models for the company. And there was this work being done to say, what role could we really play in the greater good of healthcare? But I will tell you that it didn't quite connect so fully and wholly with the work that was going on in our core business, which is our Walgreens Retail US business. And that business, had probably struggled over the years through confusion of, am I a retail grab and go unit, or am I dispensing pharmaceuticals in the back of the building, or am I providing a healthcare experience for customers and patients that are in the store? And then there was just other work going on in healthcare innovation. And when the board and I were talking about this opportunity, one of the things they stressed is, is there a day for Walgreens Boots Alliance to look at itself and have a very integrated, clear strategy on growth?
Mhm.
And so when I stepped into the building, I knew I had a big job to do. A few days in, I realized that, the focus on vaccines really gave us a leg up, because our pharmacists had began to create a new kind of relationship with the customers and patients, where, I first thing I did, I toured stores. Even before I started on March 15th, I was in stores. And what I saw was amazing. I saw people, really break down when they got their vaccine. They had been, if you remember, I started March 15th. Really, vaccine execution started about 30 days after that. Around, I remember the day,
Yeah.
April 20th, when we were getting some of our first deliveries to the store and executing. And it was interesting to see how people were just waiting on bated breath and felt so relieved. And they would talk to the pharmacist as if they were something between a physician, a parent, a sister, a caregiver, a brother, just to understand, how grateful they were to be
Mm.
vaccinated. And it was wonderful to see. But then I began to think about, so now we have really garnered the appreciation of being a caregiver and a provider. What next? And so the work we're doing right now to look at healthcare and health innovations for the future is why we, back in October, introduced our new strategy and our new vision and mission. And around that is to really provide healthcare in a localized manner. And, for us to have 9,100 physical buildings that 75% of them are within 5 miles of every household. So
Mm.
just imagine, for those who are coming into our stores to get vaccine, and we've always done immunizations. We're doing them now on a much regular basis and at every age level. And now applying the work that we're doing with Village MD and building 1,000 of those Village MD units and 3,000 health corners in our stores. So, in short order, we'll have 50% of our units that will deliver some form of health care. And then only imagine the day where, we are providing an opportunity for the patient or the customer to be in the driver's seat, right? And so a lot of this is around bringing tech enablement to the healthcare, the application of healthcare. So,
Mhm.
Mary, if you were to come into one of our stores with a Village MD, which is manned by a primary care physician group that has brought their full panel of patients along with them, and then feeling almost like you're in a concierge position where you are prescribed and walk right over to the pharmacy and get a prescription, and then use that Village MD or one of our health corners in maintenance in between. And so you know more about your health care, you're in control of it, we're providing you data. Those health corners, Mary, will allow you to walk in and have a record kept for yourself. For example, like on your A1C, if you are diabetic, and monitor it over a period of time and talk to someone. And here's what's important, because I'm sure everyone is seeing a lot of different versions of clinics and retail units. But this is a little different because I was a part of Walmart when they constructed their first 20 to 25 clinics, and we did those in Miami with Jackson Health. And what we used were physicians who were moonlighting. So every time you walked into a Walmart, you were able to do a menu-driven $29, get immunized. And so it was a menu-driven, fee-based initiative, but you never saw the same physician. You really weren't quite sure who that physician was, right? But
Mhm.
these are, with Village MD, we are uh, purchasing physician practices, bringing their panel with them. And it's a full, when you come into it, it's a full service unit. And it's really amazing how people attach to the relationship. And so this is relationship healthcare. It's localized, it's in your neighborhood, it's accessible, and you're in control. And for me, that's really important because remember, I started this, I got into this business, I joined this company to make a difference in health outcomes for people who need it the most. We're going to be building 50% of these Village MD units in medically underserved communities. And so only imagine a day where, and that's where the most chronically ill, and that's where
Right.
the largest expense to this country on healthcare is with the chronically ill. And so this is not to benefit WBA as much as it is to benefit the cost of healthcare in this country. And it has to start on a local basis and in support of hospitals and other units, but also to bringing it local to those who need it the most.
Well, this is, I mean, really thank you for explaining this. I've just started to read about the strategy and it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I was vaccinated at Walgreens, so just, I was very happy. But I never really, I never thought about the store as a place for healthcare before. And to your point,
Mm-hmm.
finding moments in time that are human and real, but then also how does that pivot to a business strategy? That's absolutely fascinating, and I think it's everything. Also, when I think about how I see younger people engage in healthcare, they
Yes.
want it on demand, they want telehealth. I mean, they've got it all figured out. But to your point, having a continuity of the person, the provider, is actually really important. So it seems like you're onto something really, really cool. And can you talk about how that dovetails with what I'm reading in the press about possibly the divestiture of boots? They kind of go, I
Yes.
guess, a
So,
couple strategic moves at once, right?
absolutely. So, part of our strategy, first and foremost, was to leverage the core of our Walgreens retail business. So, that's exactly what we're doing, first
Right.
and foremost. Second, we talked about this new healthcare venture, which would be our second pillar of our strategy. Third, we talked about being very, very clear about our capital allocation. So when I joined the company, we have actually a portfolio of investments, roughly around 20 to 25 billion dollars of investments that aren't activated in the company, and they're fine investments. And some of those you've seen us say we're going to either invest in them or we're going to take them through a strategic review and decide, how critical are they to us. This is part of the work we're doing with Boost to say if we're going to become a healthcare company, how important is that unit to the future vision and mission of the company. And so we have come to the conclusion to take Boots through a strategic review. So that's part of our strategic plan.
Got it.
And we just announced that, as you're
Mhm.
aware, you did just read
Yeah.
that. And then the fourth part of our pillar, there's four parts to the strategy, is to create a very fine, excellent team of talent at the company, both leading us in the direction of healthcare, filling in those gaps in terms of technology, and then bringing forward a diverse workplace. And so we are on a mission in that respect as well.
Fantastic. I want to come back to that. One thing on your health focus, to play devil's advocate, I know one of your
Sure.
competitors stopped selling tobacco in 2014, CVS. So how do you guys think about that that topic?
Sure. Yes, those are one of those things that, I've been very clear about that we're going to take that under strategic review. It's
Mhm.
one of those things that, we will live through our strategy. We will make decisions at this company based on what we want to be in the future. And so, as I've said many times, we're gonna take a look at the tobacco business and continue to monitor that. So we're clear about who we want to be in the future.
Excellent. I have a question from the audience I want to go to, and then there's so much I can tell we're going to run out of time. I want to get to the whole
Sure.
topic of DEI and your work, your team. But Lisa Wardell, our collective friend here, has a great question. So just stepping back more broadly, kind of how do you describe and prioritize your major stakeholders, and how do you manage the time that you spend across the stakeholders that you are engaged with as CEO of WBA?
Yes, sure. So back in October, when we held our investor day, that was the first investor day we've had in quite a few years. And actually, creating a relationship with our institutional shareholders had not been a broad priority at the company. I will tell you that I've spent at least, I've had 40 sessions and counting with our institutional shareholders just to get our message out there and talk. So that's one piece. But I will tell you that our board is a important constituent for us. But more than anything for me, my priority is around the team members of WBA. And I have spent a disproportionate amount of my time because we're still in a pretty much a predominant remote position, trying to reach out as much as I can. I visit stores. My leadership team are in stores almost every Friday. We've got a new mission for the executive leadership team to be out visiting stores throughout the week. And we convene Friday at noon to kind of chat and see what's going on. We do that virtually. And, so my most important work that I can do is to make sure that I've got team members that believe in the mission of the company. And so I've been really communicating with them and answering the need for the right kinds of jobs they need for the future, their development, investments. You probably saw last quarter we invested $120 million in wages. We
Mhm.
announced going to $15 an hour for our team members. We know that that's going to grow over a period of time. And so we are listening and making changes happen. So my most major priority are the team members of WBA.
Yeah, I love your focus on the executive team visiting stores and then reconvening on the topics. What are some of the ahas that you've gotten recently from that?
Well, first of all, we're seeing all the, to be honest with you, the crazy decisions that we've made as leaders that show up really terrible in stores, right? So sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, but it's not until you walk into a store and you see a pharmacist that needs more help than you believed you were getting. We're doing a lot of automating right now, automating our inventory, including backroom. We're doing a lot to innovate the process for registering a prescription. We're building 22 central fill locations where we will take somewhere around 30 to 40% of the prescriptions that are come to the store, send them to central fill, and they're filled outside the store and brought back in so that that pharmacist can connect personally. So we're watching the decisions that we're making and the innovation and technology that we have in the pipeline, and we're seeing it come to life. But more than anything, we're leaning in just to talk a lot to our team members, because I don't think any of us can underestimate right now the position that all of us are in post-pandemic, or still, in this pandemic. And I think what our team members are enjoying is just having conversations. So sometimes we're not even talking about business. You can walk in a store and someone will show you a picture of their family, and it'll go for 30 minutes. And before I know it, I'm showing pictures of my family. So, we're just out there, learning more about the decisions we need to make, and really making sure that the team members know that they're seen and they're heard, and we're listening and making changes.
Seen and heard. Roz, I'm sure that's having an impact on the culture. And for anybody who wants to be a student of retail, what you just described, I think is one of the most important things that, actually to have the humility to admit we make decisions sometimes from our ivory tower, and then we go to see how it happens, how it affects the store. And it's like, what were we thinking? And to have the
Right.
humility to be open to that learning culture and for people to feel heard and seen, it will have a flywheel effect. I'm sure it is already. So I think that's great. Okay,
Yes.
question from Gary Pines. What will Walgreens be doing 3 to 5 years from now as a complete healthcare provider?
You will see us really be close in on our patients and customers, and we'll know more about them than we've ever known before. Many of you likely know that from a retail perspective, we have digital loyalty relationships with our customers and patients, but now we're able to bring not only their pharmaceutical information together and personalize it in a way where we can speak to them on a one-to-one basis. So we'll see the same kind of digital retail relationship. We'll see that in digital healthcare. And so Gary, to your question, think back about 8 or 10 years ago when you would walk in a store and you'd have a flyer in your hand looking for what's on sale. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But, it's because, the digital relationship hadn't advanced. This is the same thing that's happening in healthcare right now, is consumerizing healthcare and making it personal and private, because privacy is going to be very important. We will pay close attention to that, but to make it personal and so that people can care for themselves. What this pandemic did is shed a light on the importance of staying healthy, because we're going to be in this environment where something like this virus can rear its head again. But those who are most likely to survive it are those that are in the most healthiest state. And so I think we'll all see people taking much better care of themselves, knowing their bodies better than anyone else, and knowing the signs, and having relationships that matter, that maybe don't look the same as they used to. So, for instance, in our health corners, that may be a social worker, because many times when people come into our stores, they're saying, okay, I'm just diagnosed with diabetes. I know I need to be on insulin, but I don't know what this means for my eating habits. Like when I go out to restaurants, where do I go? How do I do this? How much exercise? What exercise? And yes, they can ask their physician, and yes, they will. But you never should underestimate how important that is to maintain that over a period of time. So I see people walking into a Walgreens unit with a big difference in their mindset. You're not going to grab and go, maybe, that easy item. You'll grab cosmetics, but you'll think also about some things that are healthy for you. So I think we'll see a health conscious environment, and you'll see our stores and our physical assets responding to that.
Well, don't grab too many cosmetics. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
I
Anyways,
did throw
well,
that in there for you,
I
Mary.
know, I know. It's all right. We compete with everybody. So on digital brick and mortar, let's stay on that for a second, because maybe that question is obsolete at this point, right? Is the role of
Yeah,
online only versus physical? I think obviously
yeah,
we've proven through the pandemic, especially in your business, how important. Obviously, you cannot get a vaccine online, right? You can't get your
right,
haircut online. Not that that is equivalent at all, but how do
right.
you think about the role of brick and mortar and digital for Walgreens going forward?
So, when you think about telehealth and you think about having your medical records at your, that easy access or stored in the cloud, and how you can merge conversations together, I think you can see more comprehensive look at your health, right? Instead of independent one issue not affecting the other, or one prescription and how it interacts with another. So I think it's almost the artificial intelligence of your health plan, and what that can provide for you. I think, we can't underestimate, managing the cost of healthcare also. So imagine a day where we're able to look at, where do you want to get an MRI done? And, an MRI probably has, you know, 15 or 20 different price points. But if you can save yourself, the consumer, money on getting an MRI, and the system as well, maybe you will go to another advised system, because you have the access to data to say an MRI at this unit is X and it's X plus at another unit. And you can make that decision because an MRI is commodity. The machines are the same in different, in these places. So, I think, we'll have access to data and analytics to make better decisions for ourselves. And then you have to think about the caregivers in our life. They will be equipped with everything they need. And that's a big struggle that we all have to think about, is that at some point we're going to be a caregiver. And we've got to make it easier for them to access data so that they can care for their loved ones, because people are living longer, right? And
Yeah.
and they're going to have a caregiver at some point. And so hopefully we can facilitate that as well through digital.
It's kind of incredible what a student of the business you have become in 11 short months, and your knowledge about healthcare. It's really remarkable. Let's pivot over to another topic, which we started talking a little bit about your team, but stepping up more broadly. And this is going to be like stating the obvious. So, but obviously, Roz, you're a role model, you're a trailblazer, a first so many times. And that said, I'd be curious to get your take on this, because we've both been in corporate America for a long time, and I would say the pre-post George Floyd murder environment has opened up, obviously, not only, I think, a recognition that so much more needs to be done, but maybe more of an open environment to talk about these issues. At least I'm finding that things that we really couldn't talk about years ago in corporate America, at least I felt that way. And now I think real dialogue is happening, real intention to do better, a lot more to be done, of course. But I'd love to just get your take as a Black woman, as a CEO in this incredibly powerful company today. How do you think corporate America is doing rising to the occasion? Let's start there.
So, I have to applaud corporate America. I've seen changes be made at such a much faster rate. It came out of a very unfortunate, very visible incident that I think has stuck in the minds of many of us. And I think it has created some courageous conversations amongst people who didn't think they had to face these issues. And when you think about it, the George Floyd incident put a spotlight on the successive events that happened, right? So it wasn't just George Floyd, but it was happening again and again. And so people knew that this was not isolated. This could possibly be something systemic. And so just that question, is this systemic, takes you to think about, what are we going to do about it? If it is systemic, what do we do about it? And then the fear that it places in people, whether you're a person of color or not, I think it had to pull at the heartstrings of a ton of people. So what I would say is that, what an unfortunate incident for all of us. But from that, I've heard conversations, and this is where growth and change happens. It's just
Mhm.
having the conversation, because what happened that day with George Floyd was actually already happening, right? But
Exactly.
the only people that were paying attention to it or were seeing it were people in these communities, but now it's everyone is seeing it. So I think it is creating such a different dynamic. I've been impressed that companies are questioning themselves, thinking about their future talent, thinking that their future employee or employer is going to be, or employee is going to be, that person who saw that tape every day. They were likely in elementary school or junior high. They're going to show up in your boardrooms one day. That's their history and their reference. How are you going to interact with them when they've got that vision in their head? And I think we're all thinking about, the impact of this on the future um, folks who are in the pipeline and our future leaders. And so we're having great conversations. But then not only it's not staying at conversations, Mary, we've seen companies do great things like investing in, minority entrepreneurship, which I think is really important. Understanding that the significance of education and how important that is, and the investments that we've seen in scholarships for people in underserved communities to make sure that they have opportunities going forward. So I think it's been a game changer, and it's starting with great conversations and really some really strong solutions. We have a ways to go, though, Mary, I will say. I hope people stay vigilant and understand that the work isn't done yet. It's not too far behind us, and if we're not vigilant, we can lose sight of what's really important around building diverse and inclusive environments in these workspaces that we have.
Well, that's right. Diligent, and persistent, because it will take time. As you know, just representation, at the most senior ranks of companies is still under indexing where it needs to be, and it takes time to get there. But, one of the
Yes.
great things about retail is we have a great, diverse young workforce, and that actually gives us a lot of talent pool to pull from. And you actually, your point about this is an iconic milestone moment for younger people. So understanding what they're going to be thinking about in terms of future employees is a really great. That's a very helpful perspective. Maybe you can talk a little bit to us about Walgreens commitments to diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yes. So, I think the company has had a very good approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the company. When I think about what they have done to bring women to the workforce and actually elevate them, I think the company should be highly commended. I think there's been opportunity and still has opportunity for people of color, and actually seeing them escalate in the company. I have always, back to my days at Sam's Club and even before, made sure that I am, walking the talk. And so have made some changes in my team. It's a lot more diverse leadership team at WBA today. We're excited about that. We're having, and again, it's so interesting because we're having these courageous conversations at the top of the company, and it's filtering down inside the company. It's exciting to see. And I will also tell you too is that at WBA, so I would tell you the groundwork was there. I think we've been a great supporter in the community. I think we've done the right things by our patients and our customers. But it's really great to see what we're doing even at store level to elevate people of color, women, and be very deliberate about it. And the focus has been great. I think it's embedded in this culture. Like you stated, this company started on the south side of Chicago. And you'll see us do a lot of great work in the city of Chicago. I am a deep believer in taking care of home place. I did that when I was at Bentonville, Arkansas, influencing the community. So every opportunity I get, so I'm excited about Chicago because it's where this company started, and it has a richness of diversity that I think we'll live off of and make sure that it's a part of who we are as we go forward.
Yeah, and frankly, I did not know about the South Side of Chicago origins until I was doing my research for our interview today. So I thought
That's
that was
exactly
really
right.
cool. Well, a couple
It's
more
exciting to
questions.
look at the archives, Mary. Just if I could mention for
Yeah,
a
I
second, I
bet.
was looking at the archives, and you will see in the archives of Walgreens, the retail pharmacy store, you'll see some of the very first Black pharmacists were hired into Walgreens, and there's deep photos of them. And it's interesting to see that, maybe we didn't keep that constant, but it was in our core. So it's easy to bring back when it was in your initial core of the company. So we're pretty excited
Wow.
about that.
I see a documentary about this. That's actually really fascinating. That's really cool. A few
Yes.
more questions from our questions committee, and then I have a little bit more questions for you at the end. Not going to let you get away too easy. Let's see. So here's a great one. So, what advice would you have for STEM professionals looking to move into the business side? So, kind of going back to the early part of your career.
Yes, I think here's my feeling on that. I am a huge supporter of a STEM background because I rely on data and analytics. I am, born and bred problem solver just because of the base of my STEM background. And I've been in situations where, I can almost pick a STEM person out of the crowd just because they're asking the questions, very inquisitive, you know, always questioning the status quo. It's a very great grounding for leadership. There is not an executive in this country or this world that does not have to lead a transformation at some point. And going back to deep analytics and problem solving is an extension of having been a STEM student. And so the one thing I would say is to make the move and make it fast and swiftly. And by that I mean, be careful, getting pigeonholed, but jump in. I think, the best companies are building athletes. And by that I mean someone who can do both, right? Analyze the problem and execute. And I see that in a STEM background time and time again. So I'm a big supporter of it. I say it can be done and it should be done.
Excellent. What advice would you give your younger self based on your leadership experiences?
Oh wow. I don't know. I wouldn't change much. I've had a great time. I think I would say there's probably some times where I've probably been pretty serious about work life balance. For me, I'm a mother of two. I've been married for it'll be 34 years here in short order, and it's for me it's been my family and my work and not much in between. And so when people say, "What do you do for fun?" I mean, I have fun, but I can't say, "Oh, I collect or I study or I do." For me, I've just been both. But those two things have been very rewarding for me. So I would say, looking back on it, maybe I should have picked up another talent or something on the side. I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's highly overrated sometimes. You got to prioritize.
Yes, I
All
know.
right. What about, do you see Walgreens playing a role in the delivery of specialty care in the future, like oncology? I know you mentioned MRIs. Somebody's asking about other things like oncology.
Yes. So it's one of the if you look at what we're doing with Village MD, and right now our physicians, our primary care physicians, I could foresee a day where we would have some of those clinics possibly dedicated to specialty care, and it would be likely oncology, as mentioned, or cardiology. Some of the bigger entities. But I could see that happening for us, actually getting into specialty care. And I'll tell you also too, thinking of specialty, we just purchased Shields, which is a specialty pharmacy business. And so the space to, when you really look at chronic disorders, you cannot, disregard what's happening in some of these key categories like that. So I do see a day where we could possibly venture into that. The model that we're developing is set up for that.
Okay, weed. Yes, no. What do you think? Cannabis.
Ah,
People
oh
want
my
to
gosh.
know.
So I know people want to know. That's a interesting question. We sell some products, oils and things like that in our stores already. I'm not quite sure that our customer base is ready to turn a Walgreens into um, a cannabis location. So we'll have to think about that a little bit.
We'll flush out that strategy in the future. Okay, so we have
Exactly.
just about 5 minutes left, but I love asking a few little fun lightning round questions at the end, just so we can leave on a note of
Okay.
learning more about Roz. So let's start with
Okay.
this. What's your top health and wellness tip?
Sleep.
Oh,
Sleep is the cure of all evils. Over a period of time, putting your body and your mind at rest is the best thing you can do for yourself. I personally have been practicing that. I look back on my career and my time, and I probably average with raising kids probably 4 to 5 hours a night. I've pushed that through COVID, to 6.5 hours, and I feel like a new person. So just myself, I know that that's important, but the ability to put your body at rest and for it to repair is really important, and you get that through very good sleep and getting to that perfect REM of sleep. So sleep is number one.
now a lot of people would say 6 or 6.5 is not enough. So, but for them,
I know.
but relative to where you
Another,
were, I get it. That's a lot more sleep. That's
yes,
great. Um,
yes.
So, what about? Well, I think you just answered this. I was going to ask you what your favorite quarantine hobby is, but maybe I'll ask it differently. What's your favorite thing you like to stream if you have time to watch something for
Oh,
fun?
sure. So, I like music videos, to be honest with you. I love music. I love dancing. And I will dance on my own. And so I know all the channels. I love live concerts. I missed live concerts during COVID, and that's the one thing I cannot wait to do. So, and I binged on that during
Oh,
COVID.
I love that. Yeah, I'm into a deep TikTok vortex on dance, so we can compare notes on that sometime.
Oh,
What's
yes.
your, well, I was going to ask you what your hidden talent is, but I think now we know what it is. Leading
Yeah,
line
no, I said
dance
I
or what?
like
I
to
can't believe we
dance.
haven't done this together.
I know I'd like to dance. I don't know how good I am at it, but I try my very best. But yeah, it is a thing that I really love, really love.
Oh my gosh, I love it. If you have 15 extra minutes a day, what would you do with it?
Ooh, exercise. Um, and again, that ties to the sleep piece. So, and that's the thing that sometimes I walk away from is, if I have something pressing, I'll say, okay, I'll work out later. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, do I really have time to work out? So I throw in a little bit more exercise.
I like that. Let's see. And maybe what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Hmm. I think back to, my dad was such a hardworking individual. But one thing that he would always talk to all of us about was our integrity. But he would put it in the form of, make sure you take care of our name, right? Don't do anything
Mm,
to, defame our name. So it was almost this conversation around personal integrity. And I think the best advice I got from my dad was to make sure that I managed who I was and the impression I left with people. And that was great advice because I think back on, many times where I could have probably, been explosive and, not been my best self in a situation. But I think I've consistently made sure that people knew that they could count on me, that I'd be honest, I'd make the right decision based on the right parameters around me. And so that discussion around integrity with my dad, that was so consistent as I was growing up, I think was the best message I've ever gotten in my life.
that's incredible. What's the bravest thing you've ever done?
Ooh, oh my gosh. Zip lining with my daughter in Kansas City. Now, who said that zip lining was a smart thing to do in Kansas City? I have no idea
Nobody.
because it was the most rickety process I ever saw. And the craziest thing is that I thought, okay, I'll zip line and then, I'll walk back. No, you zip once and you're out there. You got to keep zipping until you get all the way back around. So that's the most dangerous thing I've ever done, and I'll never do it again in my life.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, let me just end on one last note. I had a couple late breaking questions, and I think we've kind of covered some of this. What industry do you consider yourself in? Retail, healthcare, groceries?
Yes.
Just tell us 5 years from now, broadly, not just the telehealth part of it, but where do you see Walgreens 5 years from now?
I really see it a very focused company, admired for the way it leads its people and team members, and admired for the services in healthcare that really changed the game for U.S. healthcare in terms of health outcomes and cost. And I hope we're in the middle of that, dead center in the middle.
That's a wonderful, wonderful note to end on. Roz, thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving
Thank
us the
you.
time today. Thank you for the discussion and for, doing this interview only 11 months into your new role. It's really greatly appreciated by all of us.